Now I'm going to introduce you to a fairly new concept. Actually, this is called a framework. It's called the Cynefin framework. We're going to see the spelling in a few minutes. That is a way of dealing with uncertainty. It's a phenomenal new idea in dealing with uncertainty, and uncertainty abounds. Uncertainty exists everywhere. If you start a new project, there's uncertainty. If you're actually a developer and you're supposed to be writing a user story that you just got, you have uncertainty. According to this framework, anytime you're faced with a new situation, you're facing with disorder. Disorder is not bad. It just means that you have not yet had time to analyze the uncertainty in this situation, and therefore it is unordered or disordered. If I analyze the situation and I start to recognize what level of uncertainty I have, the first thing I'm going to find is I'm going to find some things that are not at all, are very, very minimal uncertainty. That is to say, the situation, the problem I'm trying to solve is obvious. It's a simple situation. Simplicity usually means I have done this before. I know what I'm doing. I've been down that road. Yeah, I know what to do. All I have to do is pick the best practice that I have developed or that I know and use it, apply it, implement it. I'm going to address any problem that I identify as being in the obvious or the simple domain as being a simple problem and just solve it. That's a good thing. Obviously, if I know what I'm doing it, I'm being productive. Unfortunately, not everything is as simple as it seems. If I'm looking at a situation and there are some things in the situation that are complicated, by definition, complicated in Cynefin means it is something that I know what questions I would need to ask, but I don't know the answers. It's something I've never done before. And when I say I, by the way, my project team has never done this before. We're uncertain as to who should we ask? What should we believe? I know what questions to ask, but I don't know who to believe when I ask these questions. What's going to happen if I'm in a complicated domain is I ask a bunch of experts and I get a bunch of different answers. The experts typically do not agree that this is the best way to approach it. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to listen to the experts, and then I'm going to form my own opinion based on their knowledge, and I'm going to evolve what's called a good practice. Not a best practice. That's going to come later on. Once I have done this several times, I've done it 50 or 100 times, then I can develop or evolve the best practice. Right now, I've found ways that work, and we're going to call that a good practice. It's something that I've gotten from the experts. As long as I'm dealing with this side of the equation, I'm dealing with problems that are obvious or complicated, I'm in a domain where business analysis or all of the analysis techniques of looking at problems, looking at requirements, interviewing people, having conversations, and so on, are very effective. Where they start to fall apart is if life gets even more complex, that is to say beyond complicated, it's what what Cynefin calls complex. In a complex domain, I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know what answers to believe. I don't know who to talk to. There's a whole lot I don't know. I'm in a situation in which I am very insecure. There's a lot of uncertainty in this situation. And the only thing I can really do at this point is try to find a way of moving out of the complex domain into complicated and or obvious. And the way I do that is by developing what we call safe-to-fail tests. Now, by definition, a safe-to-fail test is something that I can do that will help me understand the situation, it will help clarify something, and I can get at least part of the problem that I'm facing over into a less complex, meaning either complicated or obvious domain. However, whatever tests I come up with can't make the situation worse. That's what we mean with safe to fail. If I execute the test, I try something out, and I learn something out of that, and I immediately can move it over into the other domain. As long as I'm in the obvious domain, I'm chugging away, I'm working, I'm getting the job done. If I'm in the complicated domain, I'm figuring out what I need to do so that I can get chugging along again and get it down into that obvious domain. If it's in the complex area, I have to find out ways of moving out of it. Just taking these three concepts, complex, complicated, and obvious, just those three domains. A funny thing happens if I start a new project. Typically, people will look at a new project and they're going to start to do what they know how to do. Meaning, they're going to try to get solutions for all of the obvious things, the simple things, because that's most people's comfort zone. We like to know what we're doing. We like to be confident in what we're doing. And so I'm just executing, I'm following my best practices. If I am on a project and it turns out that there is something that is complicated about the project, it's going to hold me up. I'm going to be doing my simple things as long as I can, and then I run into the complicated things, and it's going to take time to get those resolved. And the resolution of those can make what I did when I was thinking it was a simple situation incorrect. It can cause me to have to redo things because, oh, well, I didn't know that, so now I'm going to have to change what I did. If you're dealing with a project that has complex dimensions to it, then it's even worse because all of your work might have been wasted unless you can find a way to resolve the complex components of that situation, of that problem, of that user story, that requirement, whatever it is you're dealing with. I'd recommend taking a different approach. If you're going to use this and as a thinking tool, when you start a project, don't start by doing the things that are obvious, that are simple. Start by trying to figure out what are the things that are really complex? What are the things that we don't know how to do yet? What are the things that we are going to really have to learn something totally new in order to try to achieve it? And if I identify that there are things on this particular project that we have never done before, and we don't know of anybody that has done them, let's address them first. Because if I can solve the complex problems, then the complicated and the obvious are going to become legwork. If I, however, spend all of my time and money doing the obvious and the complicated things, and then I run up against the complex and I can't find a solution, my project is going to fail. And that, by the way, is what happens on quite a few IT projects. We get done with what works, what's obvious. We're actually wasting our efforts if we can't solve the complex problem. We actually applied this technique on a recent project in our company, and the results were amazing. Typically, we would have started the project, we would have been chugging on, thinking we're making great progress. Yeah, there's a couple things out there we'll deal with them later. But because we took the complex area first and we started looking at that and recognized that, the idea that we were working on that was going to be so simple that we could just start delivering it wasn't actually going to solve the problem at all. There were areas that were complex that we had no idea how we were going to solve them. So we decided, okay, let's not start the project right away. Let's address these complex areas first. And right now that project is still on hold because we haven't found a solution yet for the complex area. Complex, complicated, and obvious domains in Cynefin are areas that we have a strategy for, and then life gets chaotic. If you're in a chaotic situation, you're facing a chaotic problem, you basically are in a situation where you're lost. You've never been there before. You have no idea what's going on. You don't know what to do to solve the problem. You just know there's a huge problem and you got to do something. If you're talking about this from an IT or an organizational perspective, a typical example of a chaotic problem would be your production system has just crashed and you can't get it started again. If you don't get it started within a couple of weeks, your entire company is going to go bankrupt. That would be a chaotic problem. That is, you don't know why it crashed, you don't know what caused it, you don't know where to start. If you're dealing with a chaotic situation, according to the Cynefin framework, what you want to do is anything you can think of that might alleviate the situation. Stop the bleeding. Do something, anything, to try to move try to calm the situation so that you can start to think about safe to fail. If you're in chaos, you don't have time to do analysis. You don't have time to even think about how can I prove what the situation is. You have to react or bad things will happen. Now, those are the 4 domains of the Cynefin framework. Personally, I think that this is one of the greatest tools that we have invented for dealing with IT projects in recent history. Obviously, Cynefin is not an IT tool. It has a lot of applications in a lot of areas, and the example I was giving you earlier wasn't even an IT project. It was a project that we were doing for a customer to develop a video. Ultimately, you can use Cynefin in almost every walk of life. I think personally it's such a powerful tool that I want to give you some time to think about how can you react or how could you apply to your environment. Now we're talking here about the environment of defining requirements or getting an understanding of what the business needs and wants. What could you do if you are in a project and you recognize that you are in the complex domain, in the complicated domain? What tools or techniques are you familiar with that you could use to try to get this thing moved into a less complex domain, either from chaotic to complex, complex to complicated, complicated to obvious. We're trying to get everything into the simple or obvious domain so that we know what we're doing so we can actually get the job done. I'm going to give you a little time to think about that and a little exercise, and then I'll give you some information about how I see that, or how we here at our company look at using Cynefin to figure out what to do in business analysis or in requirements analysis.